Hello,
Hi.
what's your name?
Tek Manhas.
Okay, and when and where were you born?
I was born in India, the village of Haldi in India, in Hishadpur. I was a year old when I came to Canada,
What year was that?
1965.
And and then can you tell us about your family's immigration history to
Yeah.
Canada?
Yes, my grandfather came to Canada in 1921. At that time, they came by ship from Bombay to South America. I remember my grandfather telling me stories about going to Chile and Guatemala and all those places. And what they yes, they worked on people's farms for food and stuff. They had no money. They were illegal aliens, more or less. Then they made their way to South. They had a good time in Mexico. Mexican food was similar to Indian food too, stuff. So they worked on people's farms for food in Mexico. Spent a fair bit of time in Mexico.
In which city do you know the city?
I don't recall what city. My grandfather was just we were in Mexico. So
Okay.
yeah, and then they made their way to San Francisco. That's when in San Francisco, because we come from the village of Paldi back in India, Mayo Singh, the founder of Paldi here in BC, is also a fellow fellow villager back in India. So he found out that my grandfather and another individual from our village were in San Francisco. So he sent his car and driver over to San Francisco to
From BC
from Paldi, BC.
Hmm.
And so they brought my grandfather and this other individual over to Paul DBC from San Francisco. They were illegal aliens. They had no paperwork. They had nothing. So so they came across the border and settled in Paul D back in 1921. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So this was your grandfather.
My grandfather, yes.
Okay, and then what about your father?
Then my grandfather used to go back to India every year. And he used to work here, then go back. The plan was originally that they would settle back in India. Make some money here, then settle back in India. So he bought a fair amount of property back in India back then. And then my dad emigrated to Canada in 1954. He stayed here for 5 years, got his Canadian citizenship. Back then it was 5 years to get your citizenship. And then he went back in 1959. And that's when he got married, and he had my older sister was born in 1960, and I was born in 1963. Then my dad came back in 1963 and never did go back to India. And then he also was, and then we came in 1965. My mother, my uncle, my sister, we came to Paul BC in 1965.
From Paldi in Punjab.
Paul in Punjab, yes.
Very interesting.
Yes, yeah. And then I was my dad had some struggles because he was baptized sick since he was five years old. So people were telling him here that you're not gonna get a job here unless you cut your hair and stuff. My dad goes, I don't care. I'll go back to India if I don't find a job. I'm not gonna do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then, but fortunately for us, the Mayo Lumber Company had the sawmills. They were thriving at that time. So my dad started working for the Mayo Lumber Company, and he also served as the secretary and the priest of the Paul D. Sikh Temple. He did that for 25 years. He used to work in the mill in the day. His regular job was a mill. Then he used to do this free seva as in Gurdwara.
Very interesting.
And these also travel across BC, Vancouver Island and the Lower Mainland. There used to be a few Gurdwaras back then. There used to be the Ross Street Gurdwara, Abbotsford Gurdwara, New Westminster Gurdwara, Victoria, Duncan. Sorry, not Duncan, but Paldi, and Hillcrest at that time. Hillcrest, and then Hillcrest Gurdwara moved to Lake Calhoun. And they used to go and do part free seva. After on Friday nights, load us up into the station wagon car, all 6 kids, my mom, and then spend the weekend at the Gurdwara while they did part. So it's all done free seva back then too.
So they did this every weekend?
Whenever there's a Khand part.
Whenever there's a Khand part?
Yes. And back in those days, there weren't too many Khand parts.
So what's that?
There weren't too many Khand parts back then. But like this, now you have Khand part every week. Right? There you have the July Joy Mela, which is Canada's celebration in Paldi, Vaisakhi in Victoria, Gadri Babila Mela Ross in Vancouver here, and I forget what the Abbotsford was called in the New Westminster, but they had their own specific ones too. Yeah, and then I guess some of the struggle I had myself was too because my dad was a devout Sikh, and he wanted us kids to also have the Bhagwan and stuff. I'm not Amitari or nothing. I'm just I've never have been in, but growing up and going to school was a bit of a challenge.
What about your grandfather? Was he also like a baptized Sikh?
No, my grandfather was clean shaven and stuff, and then he got himself baptized back in the '60s, I do believe. But when they first came here, they shaved their head, they shaved the beards and cut their hair.
Okay, but your dad was baptized.
Yes.
Okay, and look, now coming to your story.
Yes, and then I went to school in Lake Halcyon. We were bused from the school the year I started school. The Pauli elementary school was shut down. There wasn't enough people. So they used to bus us to Lake Halcyon, which is about 45-50 minute bus ride every morning. They come, so then it's 45-50 minutes coming home. And I was the only person with the turban. And so growing up and there's mostly Godes there, mostly the white community. So it was a bit of a, sometimes people try to take your turban off and stuff like this. So there were some challenges. But fortunately, growing up in Pauli, we were a close-knit community. So everybody looked after me. So that's some of the stories that I know you guys heard about Pauli. It's a tight-knit community. Even the Chinese people, Japanese people, Ukrainians, Punjabis, we all stuck together as one big family. Yeah, and then so going to school from grade 1 to 12, I was the only person with the turban. And then soon after that, my brothers followed. I got two younger brothers, and they also followed. And then there's another family in Duncan, the Baines family, and their kids, their two sons were also went to school with turbans. Then when I went to Nelsbian College in Nanaimo, I was the only one also. And then I transferred to Simon First University, and there were other foreign students from Punjab and other parts of India that were turbans. And then I felt really, really comfortable. Yeah. So other than that, I didn't have really much struggles. I think our forefathers had the struggles, right? And we had a house, we had everything, and because of what my grandfather did and what my father did, they worked hard and put a roof over our heads, and yes.
So like when you were growing up, can you tell us like how did the social setting used to be? Like what did people used to do for like for social gatherings and on the weekends after work?
Yeah, social gatherings were good, especially growing up in Pauli. It was a tight-knit community. Always the social gathering place was a Gurdwara. There were a lot of single men there that came from India, and they used to live in the bunkhouses there. They worked in the sawmills, but they worked in the bunkhouses. They were single. So everybody gathered at the Gurdwara. You can see older gentlemen playing cards outside, playing pubby and stuff like that outside, and that's where women met too. They all organized. They all got together at the Gurdwara, or they would go to each other's houses. The men would go to work, and the ladies would say, "Okay, we're going to come to your house for pakoras today. We're going to come to your house for saag today." So these all get together, and it was just one big community.
So the ladies didn't used to work?
No, ladies did not work. The men, only the men worked in those days, and they worked in the sawmill, so they had a pretty good, decent income. And living back then, people had one car, or even if that, right? There was no cable. I think our house was the first house in Pauli to have a rotator antenna. Otherwise, you had to go on the roof and change your antenna yourself manually. But we got a rotator inside that sits on top of your TV, and then you can rotate the antenna from there. And so it was interesting. Yeah. Other than that, we just Gurdwara. Then at night we all get together. We play road hockey, or we do. In the winter time, the pond would freeze over. We'd go ice skating and play hockey, ice hockey. And then we were also fortunate that the Mayo family was there, and they had on their property, they had horses, they had a swimming pool. So
in Pauli.
Yeah. So we hang out. We would definitely spend most of our time up there, especially in the summer holidays. We would ask Auntie Joan Mayo So we'd call her about 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday or any other day in the summer holidays when we weren't going to school. Hey, Auntie Joan, can you look after us? We want to come swimming. So she'd be our lifeguard. She'd just sit there all day up to that. She'd give us, feed us juice, lunch, everything. It was just one big community again. I can't emphasize that enough. Growing up, I was very fortunate to grow up in Pauldie.
It's really good to hear.
Yes, yes.
And then again, like you mentioned, there were people from other communities like the Chinese and the Japanese and the Ukrainians. So they all kind of socialized together.
Oh, absolutely. We were all one big melting pot there. Even when there was Sunday school, we'd even go to their Sunday school. The Sikhs would go to the Christian Sunday schools, and they used to have their Sunday school in the Gurdwara, in the Gurdwara downstairs.
So that's where everybody learned Punjabi.
Punjabi, not necessarily. Punjabi, there was a small corps. There was a Gemi back in the 70s that put on Punjabi school in the evenings, couple of evenings, but not many people attended that. I learned my Punjabi. I can read Punjabi. I do part every morning, and I try to do it every night. But some circumstances just doesn't allow me. But I do it every morning, and I'll go to Roll at the Gurdwara too. But I learned that at home. My mother, during the summer holidays, my mother used to teach all those. There's 6 siblings. We have 3 sisters. We got 3 boys, 3 girls in our family.
Okay.
And so we used to spend 2 hours a day learning Punjabi from my mom at home during the summer holidays, and that's how I learned. That's how we learned Punjabi.
Nice.
Yeah.
So did you also used to visit India?
Last time I visited India was in 1973. I was 9 years old when I visited India.
So the very first time you went to India after coming to Canada was after 9 years.
Yeah. And so so I went for 6 weeks. I haven't been back since. My father came in last time he came back in 1963. He never went back. My mother since my dad's passing in 1988. My mother has started to go. She used to go every year until her health is not that good anymore. My wife came to Canada when she was 14 years old. She came to Abbotsford actually, and she took my 2 daughters, who are with my sister-in-law and her family. They went to India about 8 years ago and took my daughters and they took me to Hajur Sahib and in Nander.
Yeah.
And Goa. They tried to acclimatize them first. They spent some time in Delhi first in a hotel, 5-star hotel. Then they went to Goa. Spent a few days there in Goa at a resort. Then they went to Nander, and then they went to Punjab, back to the village, and the kids quite enjoyed it. Yeah. But I'm hopefully planning on going within the next couple of years. So, because we still have property there, and my dad's brother, there's only one brother left, and we don't know what we have there. Apparently, there's quite a bit of wealth there. But my uncle goes, he's not going to live that long. He's 71 years old, so he wants us and his boys to go, and so he can show us what we have there. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
And anything else you want to share with us? Any stories of Paldi or?
Yeah, Baldi was an interesting place. Like I say, it was a joy of my life. I even tell my kids that the best part of my life was growing up in Pauldie. Just the growing up we had, the camaraderie with the community, everybody looking after each other. It was phenomenal. Kids this day and age don't have that same sort of sense of togetherness, of community, but we definitely have had it. And I think that's why it makes me the person I am today. So I love socializing with people. I love getting out and about, talking to people. I think because of what we had in Pauldie, that sort of set the way in my life that I live my life.
So till when were you there in Paldi? Like till which year?
Well, we were in Pauldie until 1977. 1977 we moved to Duncan. What happened was in the mail lumber company sold their mills in 1973. They sold their mill in 1973. And all the houses in Pauldie were rentals. The Mayo family owned all the houses. and people wanted to get their the ownership of their own houses. So people started moving. Some people moved to Nanaimo. Some people moved to Duncan. So we moved in 1977 to Duncan. Yeah. And that's when I started school in Duncan. I went to school in Lake Cowichan from grade 1 to 8, and then in Duncan from 9 to 12.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
Anything else you want to share with us? Any particular experience or memorable moment or story?
It's all memorable. I don't know if I can pinpoint one specific thing. I guess one of the things was when the Queen Elizabeth came to Duncan in 1970 to open the Duncan Courthouse, and Mayo Singh's daughter packed us all the kids into her car and took us there, and we were up this close to the Queen with the Queen. You know, yeah, it was good.
That must have been very interesting and fascinating.
We were 6-7 years old then. It was very good. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. Other than that, Paul was just phenomenal. It was good, and met a lot of good people there. A lot of people came to Paul. The Gurdwara was a central location. People came from India. People come to Pauli, and they would live in bunkhouses, and the people will look after them. Like it was, say if you need a place to stay, come on over. We'll look after you. Yeah, you don't have that same sense of sense of that today.
Yeah.
People look after each other. Especially the population wasn't that great. Right. So if they, so anybody that came from India, Punjab, they were most welcome in anybody's house. And we had an open door policy in Pauli. You go to people's houses. If we say at lunchtime we were at somebody's house, we'd all have lunch there. If we were at somebody's house for dinner, if they were at our house for lunch, my friends, the kids were, so my mom would feed everybody lunch, that sort of thing. So it was very good.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much for sharing your family history and story with us, and being a part of this project.
Thank you, Sri.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.